but rather as who you are. That if you are alive, you move along with, because of, and in spite of the great big turning world. Join the movement, the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, at
Good afternoon. If you're in the City Council chambers and you're here to hear the Board of Referred Powers special meeting, you are in the right place. If for some reason you wandered in here for another reason, you're welcome to stay. But henceforth, we will commence the meeting as we do have a quorum. Councilmember Hahn, Councilmember Rosendahl, and myself, Chairman Cardenas, are present. 3 members of the 5-member Board of Referred Powers are present, so we will commence the meeting as it was announced that the meeting would commence at 3 p.m. At the beginning of the meeting, I would like to clarify a few things. Much has been said in the last hearing that we had, but since then, much has been played out on the radio, on the streets and kitchens, and throughout Los Angeles and beyond. A lot of misnomers as well, so I'd like to clarify at least one thing, and that is that the LAWA Retail and Food and Beverage Concession RFP timeline did in fact come into the purview of the City Council Board of Referred Powers on June 14th, 2010. Upon the final recommendations presented to the Board of Referred Powers, the city clerk received files from LAWA, and that was on June 14th. For some reason, some people feel that the Board of Referred Powers has been taking way too long to hear this very complicated matter. I will briefly point out that on September 16, 2008, the concessions outreach meeting commenced, and since then, it took from September 16, 2008 for LAWA to dispose of its responsibilities and turn it over to the Board of Referred Powers. So across just shy of 2 years, it took for this complicated item to get to the Board of Referred Powers. Apparently, there seems to be some consternation or urgency to get this to the floor of the full council as soon as possible. As chairman of this committee, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that we vet this process and we vet our responsibilities as clearly and as openly as possible before we put it forward from this committee. Whatever the decisions of this committee leave this committee, we have a responsibility to thoroughly vet all of the process and make sure that we make a good and well-informed decision. So, I'll remind you, the City Council has only had the purview of this matter since June 14th, just shy of 60 days from today. In addition to that, my office reconfirmed that if the fact of the matter is, we did not convene for the first couple of weeks that we had it within our purview because a conversation between myself and Gina Marie Lindsay, her and some of her key staff were going to be either out of the country or unavailable, so I accommodated LAWA's request via Gina Marie Lindsay to not hear the item immediately after June 14th to allow them and her proper members of her staff to be here so that they could be present and inform this committee should it be necessary. So my point to all of you is this. This Board of Referred Powers has been deliberating this matter for less than 45 days since we have fully had the opportunity to do so. Okay? I'm sorry you weren't present when I began this statement, Mr. Reyes, but I'll be more than happy to give this to you. The timeline of when we got it. We got this on June 14th. So it's been less than 60 days, and with the request from Gina Marie Lindsay, we've only been deliberating this for 45 days. In addition to that, this item was agendized for items 1 and 2, and I received communication from the City Attorney Carmen Tutanich late last week. I shared that with the President of the City Council Eric Garcetti, and since then, it was communicated through a letter as of Tuesday morning, received by my office on Tuesday morning. That letter from Carmen Tutanich is public information, and I would think that by now everybody who was interested enough to be in this room has done what they needed to do to make sure that they either got it from my office, from the city clerk's office, directly from the city attorney's office, etc. So that letter is in fact part of the public record, and the letter that I'm referring to is a letter dated August 9th, 2010, which is a 2-page letter and signed personally by Carmen Tutanich, the elected city attorney for the city of Los Angeles. So with that, what I would invite to come to the table is the city attorney's office, the appropriate representatives. And I would like the city attorney's office to begin by explaining to us the basic authority and responsibilities of the Board of Referred Powers. I want to make sure that everybody understands. Usually they're used to going to committee meetings where elected council members are present, but in this particular case, this is not a committee meeting. This is a Board of Referred Powers, which has a different purview and a different way in which it handles matters and a different way in which it is allowed to dispense of matters, vote on matters, announce matters, etc. So if the city attorney's office could remind us of those basic responsibilities so that people are clear as to what our purview and ability is as a Board of Referred Powers.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Kurt Livesay, CURT.
Could you bring the microphone just a little closer? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. My name is Kurt Livesay, CURT-LIVESAY. I'm an advisor to Carmen Tutanich, city attorney. I have to my left Pete Echevarria, who previously has supplied this board a one-page document summarizing the powers and authorities of the board. If I could ask Mr. Echevarria to elucidate on your questioning, I would like to do so.
Are you referring to the document dated August 11th?
Yes.
That's correct. That is correct. Confidential attorney-client privilege at the top, board decision-making alternatives.
Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, the role of the board of this body in these matters is to act as the Board of Airport Commissioners. And so therefore you exercise the same authority that the Board of Airport Commissioners would exercise. You sit then as for purposes of the contracts that are and recommendations that are before you, as the contract awarding authority. You have received and you will receive further information, I assume verbally, if not written, from the staff at the airport explaining to you their recommendations, the process that was gone through, the RFP that was prepared, and the responses that were received and the way that those were evaluated. Our office will be here to advise you on the legal aspects of that if there are questions and the validity of the actions that were taken. Today we're here, those of us who are new from your last meeting are here to comment upon the various communications we have received regarding potential conflicts or alleged conflicts in the award of the contract. And we're here for that purpose, which is, again, related to but not always directly involved in the award of a contract.
Mm-hmm. And also, referring to the letter dated August 9th, much of it was speaking to the most recent information forwarded to the City Attorney's Office and also to this board and all parties interested in reading that information. But it also speaks to some requests that were made on behalf of myself, the chairman of the committee, as to other things that I would like the City Attorney's Office to review. Have you had an opportunity to review those items as well and to report to this committee in full?
We have not, and I refer you to that very same letter where we recognize your request of the City Attorney's Office. There are two factors here that I believe this committee and you should be considering. One is a review of the contracting process itself, and a second, the conflicts allegations of late. With respect to the conflicts allegations, we've assigned that, we've begun that review, and we hope to have that soon for you. And pursuant to the letter, when we come back to you to have developed the facts, reach some conclusions for you, and give you our opinion with respect to those conflicts. This is a multi-million-dollar deal that will take years and will affect a lot of people in our city. We appreciate its gravity, and that's one of the reasons we take these allegations seriously, and by the time we come back to you, have an opinion for you. That's why we've asked for additional time.
Okay. Now, when you render your opinion as the Office of the City Attorney of Los Angeles, you render your opinion toward this board, which in effect is your client in this matter?
We have, as you know, several clients up and down the line. With respect to the review of the contracting process itself, you have appropriately dealt with the airport staff and our staff, that is, city attorney staff assigned to the airport, who are attorneys for that staff out there. That's the attorney-client relationship. So I would expect that this board will be dealing with them on the overall review process, but dealing with me or others straight from the city attorney's office. I'm talking about the 8th floor in City Hall East with respect to the conflict opinion.
Okay. And if I may expand upon the role of our office and the client whom we serve, ultimately it is the City of Los Angeles. At any given time, it is the person who is speaking on behalf of that client to us. In the early stages of this process, those persons were the staff at the airport. As the matter moves forward to the Commission speaking for the client at that point in time, and we provide advice, and we strive always to provide the same and the best advice that we've provided to that board as well. As you know, in many of these instances, the contracts are long-term or specifically required by the charter to come to the City Council ultimately. And at that point, we're advising the City Council as the body that speaks for the client ultimately on those matters.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the letter dated August 9th, from the city attorney, it seems to be written in a fashion that lets us know, the client at this moment in time that's before you, it lets us know that the city attorney, in order for them to do their job appropriately, that they would need time to do so beyond today. In addition to that, I read the letter as not saying that we can or cannot make a decision without the city attorney's opinion.
Oh, you may make a decision without the city attorney's opinion. It's just ultimately whatever your decision here, as I understand it, is referred to the council en banc. When that occurs, we'll have an opinion then. Our opinion then, if you decide to proceed today over our wishes, our opinion then may reflect that failure to follow our advice today. That's bluntly how I would perceive it works.
Moreover, if I may, the effect of proceeding without our advice may lead to a decision that is legally indefensible, and so you would want to have, I think, the benefit of our advice, so that, to give an example, in the 1090 Government Code Section 1090 situation, if such a conflict is found to exist, and the contract is awarded contrary to the requirements of 1090, that contract is void. So I would think that you would want to hear our advice on those 1090 issues before you do act.
Yes, you actually anticipated my next question. I just wanted to make it clear to the members of this committee that nobody's trying to manipulate the idea that, not this committee, this board, that no one here is trying to manipulate the idea that we cannot take action without the city attorney's full opinion and vetting of this matter. That we technically could, but at the same time, that matter would probably not bode well for us should somebody try to challenge our decisions, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, Mr. Reyes.
There are several scenarios that can evolve from this point on. It is possible to maintain the integrity of the process, move on to council, still hear your advice, and in council continue to deliberate based on the findings of the city attorney. Should your conclusions create an environment that we as a council, as a policymaking body, need to take appropriate actions based on your findings, that could happen at the council level as well, correct?
The council is the policy decider, unquestionably about that. The risk in a scenario such as that is that the contract itself, whatever the choice might be, could be void.
If we make a recommendation for a contract, that's the assumption you're making with what you just said.
Yes, if you do not conclude any contract, I'm not sure the relevance of our opinion. Our opinion is one
Well, your opinion would be much appreciated if at the council level discussion, you give us our legal options based on whatever findings your letter is suggesting it makes.
If I may, we're in agreement that, yes, this matter could, in theory, move forward to council from this board, assuming that there was a selection made. Let me explain. You're acting as the board of airport commissioners, and so your actions would move to council if you take particular actions. If you award a contract that is subject to council review, that award then goes to council, and council gets to vote whether it approves it or not. And it's an up or down vote in that situation. It's not the ability to select someone else for the contract. Right. It's an up or down vote. Were the board to take a different type of action, which is, let's say, for example, with respect to one of the packages, to instruct that to reject all proposals and to instruct that a new RFP be issued for that package, that's not an action that council could review other than through the 245 process. So it would be a different setting as well. And yes, our advice could happen now, and we would be there again to advise the council if it took up the matter, or when it took up the matter, with respect to any legal concerns that arise at that point in time.
The point of my comment is that there are several options.
There are.
That does not preclude having your advice.
There are.
It just depends on the action of this committee or this commission or Board of Preferred Powers, however you want to describe that. We are the Board of Preferred Powers, so I'll stick with that legal entity that we are right now serving. So as such, depending on what this Board of Preferred Powers suggests, we can move forward, but we do have a series of options in front of us.
And there's a level of risk involved, of course, that you should weigh as well.
Hold on.
Thank you.
On that note, perhaps the City Attorney's Office could actually remind us, unlike a committee, the committee process that the City of Los Angeles follows, that the council follows, this Board of Referred Powers, should we vote on a matter, it goes, therefore, should it go to the council deals with it on an up or down vote. The council doesn't have the purview to change or alter that decision, other than affirm that decision of the Board of Referred Powers or reject that decision of the Board of Referred Powers. What responsibility do we have once it goes to the City Council?
I think you've articulated it well.
I'd rather have you say it with all the respect. Down vote.
I
would rather have you say it in your own words, because I would just prefer that. Thank you for agreeing, but I need to hear it in your words.
Well, I answered, I believe, to the best of my ability, not just to agree with you, Mr. Chairman, but thank you. The situation is this, as I understand it. The conduct of this board, who's sitting in place of the Board of Airport Commissioners, has the authority of the Board of Airport Commissioners, and that is to decide whether or not anyone should receive a contract. If you decide that someone should receive a contract from one part of this, that would go to the City Council. The City Council could then vote up or down. Not that another competitor should be substituted for your decision, not a review of your decision, except yes or no, affirmed or denied.
Which is different than the committee process in this city. Correct. We've altered many committee reports, etc., in the council process. This is different than that.
Yes.
That's correct.
Thank you. Ms. Hahn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will say I thought the letter of August, which one? The one page, the August 11th, that sets out what this board can do was very clear, very understandable. I took note of the one little sentence that said, in summary, as the awarding authority for these contracts, the board can take various actions after consideration of all the information presented. And I think that's partly why we're here today, is because, we want to do this right. I mean, no one more than me, I don't think, wants a modernized airport, new concessions. I've been pushing for it, really strongly. I mean, this was an incredible process. I was very much involved in it. But we're at this point, and it was, I will say, unexpected, even a little bit surprising, that we got the subsequent letter from the city attorney, the previous one, basically saying it's come to our attention that there could be some 1090 conflicts with some of the bidders. We've had things that have been forwarded to our office that cause us enough concern or pause that we're basically asking if you would delay your action on this board until we have had the opportunity to investigate it, to bring it to light, to put sunshine on it. So again, I don't really remember having been asked that before, to really put off our decision until something happens. Usually the city attorney kind of waits for us to ask for an opinion or after something's been awarded, because I understand 1090s, actually there can't be a conflict until possibly the contract is awarded. So can you do this investigation quicker? We don't want to be accused of delaying this unnecessarily. Is that possible? Do you need the 30 days? And then I guess my big question would be, what information are we going to have as this authority in 30 days that should give us enough comfort or enough concern to either act one way or another? I mean, because you're really sort of kind of dramatic. What the city attorney is asking us to do. So is this real? Is this something you're really asking this board to wait? I want to give the city attorney what they're asking for if this is that important and that necessary. But I guess I want to know, can it be done quicker? What information are we really going to have in 30 days that's going to change what we have before us today to make this decision?
Yes, it may be done quicker. We will do it as soon as possible. The reason it's 30 days is explained in the words of the city attorney, I believe, the reason for his calculation. But 30 days from today, maybe a week after, we will be able to provide you the information. We will conclude it as soon as possible. One of the reasons that I'm speculating as to the time is that I'm not sure what tomorrow's allegations might bring. As we investigate this matter, we'll take us, as many of you have said in the past, wherever the evidence leads us. The nature of the investigation is of such gravity that we want to get to the bottom of it for you. So when we come back to you, we will have our recommendation and the reasons for it. If we've concluded there is a conflict, we will be able to articulate for you to your satisfaction so that you will conclude there's a conflict as well. This thing about there being no 1090 violation until the contract is reached may be true. The liquor store might not have been robbed had the money not been taken. Here's the problem. In the RFP process, we're trying to make as clean and transparent for you as we can. If we know there's an allegation out there during the process, we want to solve that for you so you'll have the clean information to make the decision.
And you're confident that within 30 days, we will have that information?
On the ones we have now, absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Parks and then Mr. Rosendahl. Thank you.
Just ask a little more fundamental question. You've written a letter to the board or comment that the board had asked for information, and the concern I have is the board, as your client, has not asked for any information. And I'm just trying to figure out if we're acting as commissioners, then the only power of a commission is 3 votes. Not a single commissioner, not a single person. So if you're responding to this board, I don't believe this board has ever, as a group, asked you anything. And so that's my number one concern. The other issue, if we are acting as a commission, I would think that we're under the authority of the executive orders that were written during the Hahn administration that talked about the conduct of commissioners in dealing with contracts and vendors and leasing, which basically says that you as an individual commissioner can't be involved with the putting together of a RFP or a leasing agreement before it comes to the board for a decision. It also, in one of the executive orders, states clearly that the board or commissioners are the policy-making body of the department, and the general manager runs the administrative, and everything that the board wants regarding their activity has to go through the general manager. And so with those things in place, I'm not sure how we got to the point of a 30-day delay in an investigation and serious allegations that I'm not aware of. I've read a couple of times a 100-plus page report that Kelly Martin put together. I don't know if there could be any more allegations than were lodged in that report that hasn't been addressed initially. And I understand, as a representative of the city attorney's office, she got that report endorsed by management before it was sent forward. So if we're saying that she wrote a 100-page report that is now trumped by some unknown information, I would think that it would be worthy of bringing to this commission or this board to have us evaluate whether we agree that a 30-day investigation needs to be done, as opposed to being told there's one going to be done. So that's my fundamental issue, is how did we get here? Because this board has not directed the city attorney to do anything.
I believe technically you're correct. The board
charter.
One person at a time, please.
The board, as a body, did not act to request the specific advice that we're discussing, which is the conflict advice. And it is independent of the prior letter that you're referring to.
But shouldn't we know what it is before before you respond? Shouldn't the board know what the level, because we may not agree that it's a conflict. We may evaluate it totally different.
And I was getting to that point.
Mr. Parks, please allow him to answer. And
I want to badger him, because
no, you'll have plenty of time. I know you've known each other a long time, but you'll have plenty of time. I'll give you all the time you need to go back and forth on the questioning.
The fact of the matter is that when it comes to particularly conflicts and the potential for the actions of a board or any other contract awarding authority to be found void and to be nullified, when we have information that leads us to believe that there is a conflict, we do undertake that review independent of being requested. We will initiate it. Ms. Hahn mentioned before that she hadn't heard of this type of a request being made by our office. We do, in fact, volunteer to awarding authorities or to commissions that are about to act. Usually it's commissions that do a great deal of this work for the city. When information comes to us about a potential conflict, and we will say we're looking at this and we'll review and we act as expeditiously as possible. I must say that in this particular situation there are allegations that came to our attention and that have been addressed, I believe, to the board as the board of referred powers about conflicts that came after the last meeting occurred. And we undertook to try and investigate those as soon as possible. There was a conversation, as I understand it, between the city attorney and Mr. Cardenas regarding his concerns about those allegations being addressed as well by our office. Okay. But there was not action by this board.
There was no action by the board, which, if your first statement was that the board is acting as the commission, correct, then the commission would have to make a decision whether it was worthy of sending it to the department to ask them to clarify it, which may bring the city attorney's office back involved.
With all due respect, as these attorneys for the city, it's a determination that we make independently as well, whether the commission...
Pete, I've only been here for several decades. I have never seen the city attorney on their own initiative go and investigate something that was not at the direction of a board or an appropriate authority.
Do you find that to be the case, Mr. Echeverria?
I'm sorry?
Do you find that statement by Mr. Parks to be the case in the last few decades? You've been here for a few decades. Yeah. Correct. Do you find that statement to be accurate and correct, that the city attorney's office does not offer to look into and or advise without being requested first?
We do it on a number of occasions, and I can't give you a specific example now, but I have done it when I advised, for example, the Board of Recreation and Park Commissioners, which was for a number of years. There were several occasions on which information came to me about a potential conflict, and I then broached it to the board and said, we're looking into this. You're going to be getting an opinion from us.
Yeah,
that was whether they wanted it or not sometimes.
The operative word is you went to the board. And
not to get permission, however.
Well,
to inform
the operative word is you went to the board.
To inform them of it. This is your subsequent meeting to the last time that to when the information came to us in this situation.
And when do we get to hear the substance of your concerns as it relates to this board? When do we get to hear how critical they are and why they are so much substance that we would take 30 days? When do we hear that?
As soon as we reach that conclusion.
Hold on a second. As chairman of this committee, I'm going to take the prerogative to clarify for everybody in the room and also the people on this board. The City Council and this Board of Referred Powers is not expected to meet after next week. The Board of Referred Powers and the City Council is 99.999% likely, and as chairman of this committee, I am not going to call this Board of Referred Powers to order during the 2 weeks that the council is in recess. So that being the case, with all due respect to the people questioning the city attorney, why 30 days? I will clarify for you a conversation that I had with Carmen Chutanich when he said that he would like to take the time, the appropriate amount of time to appropriately advise of his and his office's opinion on these matters, that I asked him, how soon can you do it? And then I reminded him, I interjected in the conversation that we would not be convening for the last 2 weeks of August. And he said, then give me until the time as soon as you get back. That's how we get to 30 days, so that everybody understands. Now, whether or not if the city attorney's office can be ready in 2.5 weeks, we're not going to be here to listen to it. When we reconvene this, the city attorney has opined and has let us know in writing, and as his people are repeating right now, within 30 days they will have clarity and the answers to this board. Mr. Parks.
Yeah. Let me just say this. When you say you get it to us when you finish, I think that's basically way down the road. The issue is we should know what you think is so important to determine whether we agree with you that it's that important. And until we understand what you're investigating, which we should as a commission, then you've not been, by this board, given the direction that we as a group or a majority believe there's something so significant that it's going to take you 30 days to look into it. We may hear your statement and probably in closed session and basically evaluate it and say, we don't agree with you. We don't have to take your advice. And so these are things that I think we're jumping ahead, because I don't know if all of us know any information that's worthy of a 30-day delay, because all we've gotten is a letter that says we're going to investigate something, and as your statement earlier, that's so serious that we believe we have to do it. We don't know what that is. And again, we as a client, we should be the ones that say we agree or we don't agree. We shouldn't wait for you to finish the report and then look at it and say, why did you waste 30 days on this?
Mr. Parks, we will be going into closed session so we can ask those kinds of questions. These are preliminary discussions about the legalities. Obviously, the kinds of things that we can speak of without going into closed session are the matters that we're speaking of right now. However, in the next few minutes, or as soon as the members of this board are done with their preliminary questions, we will go into closed session and we will have that kind of discussion. Any other questions before I go to Mr. Rosendahl?
No, that's fine.
Okay, Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank you for convening this meeting, and I want to thank the City Attorney's Office for cooperating in this meeting. You know, I don't know anything about anything regarding this, but I know one thing. The room is full of lobbyists with lots of grins and smiles on their faces and ahs and so on. That much I know I'm seeing here right now. As a council member, and now as a, quote, commissioner, whatever that's supposed to mean, I know nothing about these issues. Okay? First of all, I don't know anything about city attorney gameplay. I'm glad you're here. You can tell us what's going on, what the conflicts are. You can do it in closed session. I want to know the facts and the information. Gina Marie Lindsay, who we hired to manage this airport process, went through a long process. I haven't even heard from her the process they went through, who protested, who got it, what the issue, nothing. since I've been here. I was so upset last week, I almost resigned from this board because I thought it was a joke. Because what am I supposed to do? Well, I'm supposed to weigh the facts. I haven't had an opportunity to weigh the facts. I also know that the longer it goes on, hosts gets it month to month, and maybe they end up with it. Who knows? I don't know. But I know they're here in the room too, and I don't know who's good, who's bad. I don't. And that's why I don't have a dog in this fight. But what I have a dog in is government in the sunshine. And I've been nothing but frustrated by the little back-channel crap that's going on rather than a real discussion of what our job is here and what our policy is. So if there's anything you can tell us on the record in front of this public audience that suggests we should continue this item until after the recess, I want to hear it. I also want to hear from the general manager before we leave what process she went through. Now, the fact that that whole board had to recuse itself, so be it. It's now in my lap. But I ain't a tool of anybody here. And I'm just frustrated that I don't even know what we're talking about. So my first question is to the city attorney. What is these potential conflicts you can tell us on the record? Why you need 30 days to do it? And then I'd like to hear from Jeanna Marie Lindsay the process she went through that brings us to a point where there was recommendations made by her department to this commission. I just want to know something more than the da-da-da-da that I've been hearing. Thank you.
There are two issues. One has to do with the conflicts, and the second has to do with the process itself. With respect to the first one, we became aware of the conflict issues after the matter was here.
What about your city attorneys that were involved in this entire process? This Kelly Martin, who I've seen for years around here. What about all those people?
And Kelly Martin and Kelly Martin's letter is characterized well by Pete Echevarria. She is an attorney with the city attorney's office assigned to the airport. She gave you a letter based on the information she had from the airport staff.
Right.
At that time.
At that time. What we're dealing with here, so far as I know, is new information to everybody in the process. These allegations of the conflict under 1090 are new.
Right. So will we have that in closed session after we discuss so I can understand what they may be?
Yes.
Correct. And I can characterize the allegations at this point in time as being allegations about potential conflicts that arise because of the involvement of certain consultants in the preparation of the RFP that may also be involved in the award of the contract. By the way, I'm somewhat surprised that you have not received copies of the communications that were received from the protesters themselves who have raised these allegations, and which we have an obligation to look into.
I got a binder about that high, but, papers written and things are said. I want to hear it in the sunlight of the room.
So it's allegations regarding potential implications of Section 1090, which would have the effect of voiding any contract that you award to someone who is conflicted. That's why we believe that we have an obligation to look into it and provide you our advice.
So you feel seriously enough that the issues are serious enough that you need to tell us about it in closed session to advise us in the role we're in as
in particular, because our gathering of information and our review of the information is not yet complete. So yes, we need to give you a status report in closed session.
Hold on. Are you done, Mr. Rosendahl?
I just want to know from Jeanna Marie, too, with her process she went through in the sunroom here or whenever in today's hearing, so I get a better understanding of what the issues are I'm dealing with, that's all.
Okay, once we're done with the city attorney questioning in closed session and out of session, hopefully we'll have time and we'll still have a quorum to do so.
Sure.
Hold on, Mr. Parks and then Ms. Hahn.
You got these new allegations. Did anyone from the city attorney's office talk to the general manager of the airport to ask whether she was aware or whether these were new or whether these were issues were as serious as you perceived?
That would be a part of the investigative process that really should be considered in the closed session part of it. The manager and others out there who may be witnesses or not witnesses, who may have information or may not have information, should not be a public item at this point.
No, I'm just saying, did you talk with her to get some resolution or understanding? Did she have any awareness of this, or is this new or old news?
I desire not to reveal with whom we've spoken publicly.
So you'll answer his question in closed session?
Yes.
Glad to, right?
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions until we go into closed session?
I'll just ask her when she comes up.
Great. Ms. Hahn.
I just wanted to go on record, with all due respect to my colleague, Councilmember Rosendahl. I don't want the public who is listening to this meeting to think that in any way this process has been, some secretive or behind closed doors or in dark places. This has been a very open, transparent process, in my opinion. We have scorecards and score sheets and points awarded and criteria for how the winners and losers came to be. I mean, it's been very open. We had one meeting where we had the whole hearing on what the process was, what we went through. I don't know if you didn't hear it, but I mean, we've heard how this process happened. I have stacks of document that I've read. I've looked at the protest. I've read very seriously what the city attorney has said recently. And I think the point is, and I'm glad you asked, that we hear it today, but I think why we're here today is there's new information, according to the city attorney, that he does want to bring to light. He does want us to look at new information, and in 30 days, I think, Mr. Parks, we're going to have the information to decide whether or not we do think it's serious, whether we do think it warrants any changing in the awarding of these contracts, or whether we think it warrants some changes. So I think this process has been very open, very much in the sunlight. I don't want people to think this has been some weird, secretive process that deals are being made behind closed doors. That has not been my experience in this process at all.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. And with that, I'd also like to state this process is so transparent and so open that we're going to inconvenience everybody here who is not to stay in closed session and leave the room, because normally what I could do as the chairman of this committee is we could leave you all sitting here comfortably and we can go into a back room. But we're not going to go into a back room because too many people, including some council members, have given ideas that perhaps there's some backroom dealings going on or what have you. So not only figuratively, but literally, we are not going to go into the back room for closed session. So we're going to inconvenience a whole lot of lobbyists and people who came and cooks and whoever else are here. So at this time, we're going to go into closed session, and we will have the sergeants and also the city attorney's office make sure that nobody is left in the room that should not be here while we were conversing in closed session with our city attorneys. Yes. Okay, before we go into closed session, we're going to hear one public comment card that was turned in. If I had that public comment card before me, I would call it. And now that I have it before me, we have one public comment card filled out on item number 1, and we are currently on both concurrent items 1 and 2. Christopher M. Westhoff. You have 2 minutes, Mr. Westhoff, from the point that you get to the podium and begin to speak.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll waive speaking this time until the matter gets before this board and the 1090 question comes up.
So you're saying that you prefer to speak after we come out of closed session, or in the next meeting?
Once the 1090 matter is going to be in front of the board, and if you're going to wait for the city attorney opinion, I can certainly wait until that opinion comes out.
Okay, why don't you do yourself a favor? If you want to be heard, you've been called now. I do not control this committee by the 3 votes that could take it in any direction they choose to at any time, so you're probably better off trying to take your shot right now if you want to be heard.
Well, thank you. Christopher Westhoff, I represent Arias USA in this matter. I just want to relate that the issue that has been raised with relative to Arias and the possible 1090 conflict of interest does not have any substance. Arias USA does not have a relationship with Jacobs Consultancy, who was advising the airport on this concession agreements. And I do believe that Councilmember Reyes raises a point that the contracts in this matter will not become contracts until the full city council acts on them. So this committee, board of referred powers, could refer the matters which are individual contracts. They're not in a group. They're individual contracts with individual contractors, and those matters could be sent to the full city council for action. The city attorney letter could then catch up with those and be in front of the full city council, and the full city council will then have the opportunity, based on whatever advice they receive from the city attorney, to act accordingly on each of the individual contracts. Arias USA is quite confident that there is no conflict of interest relative to its proposed contracts recommendations by WAWA, so we're fine with that. But the contracts do not come into fruition until the full city council acts on the matters. So there is no voided contract until the council acts. So you could send them on legally. Thank you.
Thank you for your advice and your public comment. That was the only public comment card we have at this time. Mr. City Attorney and also the clerk, can we, excuse me one second, can we close public comment for the remainder of the committee now that we've opened it up? Or do I have to reopen it after closed session?
You do not have to reopen it.
Okay. All right. Those are the only public comment cards that I have on the items that are agendized for this meeting. Therefore, public comment on items 1 and 2 will now be closed. We have a question from Mr. Parks.
I was just wondering if Ms. Lindsay could come up and, I think Mr. Roosevelt asked if she could make some comments in the public or at least give us some insight as to her knowledge of new information.
Okay, for all of you who are standing thinking that we're going to closed session at this moment, we are not going to go into closed session at this moment, and I will re-announce when we officially will go into closed session. Okay. Yes. Gina Marie Lindsay, you have some questions from the council members. Do you remember what the questions were so far?
I remember one question was whether the latest concerns over perceived conflict of interest, were those questions discussed with me? And to the best of my recollection, here's how it happened. I received copies of the letters that were lodged by a couple of the proposers that were unhappy because they're not recommended. They identified 2 consultant contracts, which we had listed in our responses back to you, Mr. Cardenas, as chairman of the committee when you gave us a list of several questions. You asked what was our staff that worked on this, what were any consultants that worked on this. We listed 2 consultants, and one of the proposers was unhappy that there was a perceived relationship between Arias and Jacobs Consultancy. We have used Jacobs Consultancy to help us craft the RFP. I also understand that there was an allegation that Smart Design, which was another consultant that we used to help us craft design standards for the construction of some of the concession space. There was an allegation that Smart Design has also worked with several of the proposers, and that those relationships are problematic. The city attorney did not come and ask me about whether those relationships existed. However, once I saw the letters, I did go down and talk with the city attorney, and whether the answer is I did not know about any of those relationships, if they existed. Had I known of those relationships, if they were prior to adjudication of our RFP, I would not have thought that they were conflicts. The aviation industry is a relatively small industry. The people that are very good at what they do often work together. So that's the best way I can try to address the question that I remember, Councilman Parks.
Question to the city attorney. If the general manager of a department that is engaged in an extensive RFP process or a small RFP process, if the general manager of a particular department is engaging in that process and they do engage with some consultants and they are not aware of those conflicts, does that nullify the potential of there being a problem if there end up having been true 1090 conflicts that existed?
If it's
the knowledge of the general manager, does that change the 1090 law, how it's applied?
The knowledge of whether there's an inappropriate conflict or not is not a factor in determining whether 1090 was violated.
But I don't think that was her answer.
No, he's answering my question. Yeah. He's answering my question, Mr. Parks. My question is this. Thank you very much, Gina Marie, for bringing us up to speed as to when you were brought aware of this by documents by certain proposers and you walking over to the city attorney's office and having a discussion with the city attorney's office about those documents. But my question to the city attorney, Mr. Parks, is this. Whether or not the general manager or the entity that hired a consultant, whether or not they were aware of those potential 1090 conflicts prior to them hiring them or engaging them in that process, does that make a difference if, in fact, there did exist 1090 conflicts? If there did exist 1090 conflicts?
No.
But I think her answer was the timing of the use of the consultant in her mind did not create a conflict. that, if I understood her answer.
But the thing is, Gina Marie said that she was not aware of any conflicts.
I was not aware of any
Yeah, now whether or not she was aware of it or not, or whether she thought or not there was, she never even said she did or didn't think there was. She just said that she was not aware of it.
I was not aware of any of the
But I think
relationships.
if I
right.
understood your comments, you said that if at the timing that they were involved in the process would not have led you to believe there would have been a conflict.
Correct.
Yeah.
May I also add to that? In part of the public, the question and answer, as you may recall, when we were talking about the process of crafting the RFP and then putting it out officially and then getting public comment, one of the questions that we received from proposers was whether, and in fact it was a specific proposer, could they use Smart Design, which was the consultant that we had used to craft the design guidelines for us, could they use that consultant in their work to prepare for their proposal? And our answer was no. Out of an abundance of caution, once somebody asked the question and we had that question in front of us, we said, no, don't do that.
Well, with all due respect, Ms. Gina Marie Lindsay, is it more accurate that you told them that it could null and void their proposal should they submit if they use them, but to tell them, no, you can't use them is a different story? It wouldn't be smart. It would put them in conflict if they did, but to tell them no is... What exactly did you tell them?
I would have to go check our written response.
But do you understand what I'm saying? Because
yes,
that's a question that, for their city attorney to say, no, you better not if you want to try to get some business there. But for a third party such as LAWA to tell a proposer answer to a question, I would think that your answer was most likely they've been involved in the process. If you use them, very likely it will knock you out because that's a conflict.
I don't think we were that specific, Mr. Chairman, but we have a written response, so we can let you know exactly what we did say.
Now that it's come up for this board, it's good for us to know that exact response.
Certainly.
Now, we will go into the closed session now, ladies and gentlemen.
Are you sure?
Positive. The next questions will be in closed session, and the next answers will be in closed session. And let the people come in. Okay. Yeah, but I got to give them an opportunity to get back in. Then we'll get sued over that. Okay. We are now back in open session. It appears that interested parties are filing into the room. I want to make sure that we get most or all of them an opportunity to get back in before we continue this meeting. We are now back from closed session on this Board of Referred Power special meeting. No actions, discussion was taken in closed session, no actions were taken in closed session, so there's no actions to announce in open session relative to the closed session. We are continuing to discuss items 1 and 2. We already opened up public comment and closed public comment on items 1 and 2. At this time, I would like to announce that once again we have been requested by our City Attorney Carmen Tutanich on a letter dated on August 9th that he would like 30 days to do the work of his office to give his opinions and recommendations and findings on the matters that have been brought to his attention and also brought to the attention of the chairman of this committee and various members of this committee. Okay, and also I will let everybody know that it is the intention of this committee to schedule a meeting perhaps at 10 o'clock in the morning on September 9th, which is a Thursday, which happens to be exactly 30 days from the letter from the city attorney. And at that time, we'll resume, and I'm going to personally clear off my entire calendar for the day, just to warn you that we're going to try to get as much done as possible in that meeting. And I'm going to apprise the members of between now and then of the responsibilities of this committee and the adherences that this committee needs to follow in order for us to vet through this process and hear every element that we legally need to hear before we can appropriately move items or entertain motions of action to move items out of this committee or to move the items that are within our purview. So with that, yes, Mr. Reyes?
Was that a formal warning to clear the day?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
One of the things
just for the record, I want to make sure.
One of the things that I would like to promise to the members of this committee, that we will try to make the committee, these meetings as fruitful as possible, yet at the same time, it is my intent not to end up having 30 meetings, but hopefully, after a couple of meetings of this board, we will be able to adhere to all of our responsibilities and then move forward with the decisions of this board. So without objection, that'll be the order, and thank you all very much for your attendance. We now will open it up for general public comment, which is a requirement of this board. I do not have any general public comment cards before me, and seeing no one swinging their hands or saying that they did, so general public comment has been opened. General public comment is now closed. With that, this board meeting is now adjourned.
Oh, my staff retreat.
All righty then.